From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We begin tonight with the reality of compromise. We've all heard President Bush and the Democrats talk about the need to reason together on how to get over some of the nation's big economic hurdles. Today, when the president's men merely floated an idea for reducing the enormous debt created by all the savings and loan fiascos, the Democrats in Congress went for their shotguns. It certainly upset the president's day. Here's our White House correspondent, Britt Hume.
The president was trying today to draw attention to what he had wanted to be the theme of his first week in office, his desire to improve government ethics. His only public event today was the formal naming of a commission on the matter. But all over town, the focus was on the ethics of a Treasury Department idea to finance the multi-billion-dollar bailout of ailing savings and loans with higher federal insurance premiums paid directly by depositors. The rate? About 25 cents for every $100 deposited.
That's just like any other insurance premium, a revenue generation for services rendered.
At the White House, Press Secretary Marlin Fitzwater said the plan was just a trial balloon. But the president told reporters off camera that it was like the user fee tourists pay to use Yosemite Park. And Chief of Staff John Sununu said it was simply an adjustment upward of an insurance premium and not a new tax. He hastened to add, though, that it was just an idea. On Capitol Hill, the idea was met with a chorus of ridicule.
I don't think it has a chance of getting anywhere.
What someone down at Treasury is talking about is equivalent to taxing hostages in order to pay off the kidnappers. Depositors did not cause the thrift problem. They are innocent victims.
It's too soon to say the honeymoon is over, but it seems safe to say the president won't be riding this particular trial balloon over Niagara Falls, Yosemite Park, or anywhere else. Britt Hume, ABC News, the White House.
At the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, President Bush's choice for Secretary of Defense was added today. Back when he was the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee from 1981 to 84, John Tower built a reputation as an advocate of a bigger and more expensive military. Today he had to convince his old committee, now considering whether he should be confirmed, that he realizes times have changed. Here's ABC's Jim Wooten.
The man who led the charge for massive military spending presented himself to the committee today as a pincher of Pentagon pennies.
I am not such a mindless hawk that I would come to you and ask you for a substantial increase in defense expenditure when I know that it's not going to happen.
No more pet rocks, he promised, and no more sacred cows. His Defense Department, he said, would squeeze the most bang from the fewest bucks and establish new standards of integrity.
We must restore public confidence, not just in the Pentagon, but in the national security process.
Conceding that he is himself no management genius, Tower announced the nomination of Donald Atwood, the former vice chairman of General Motors, as his principal deputy. To Senators' gentle references to his business relationships with the defense industry, Tower said he's cut all ties. Can't be helped or hurt by their profit or loss.
I am damaged only by the limitation on my salary imposed by the Congress of the United States.
You're asking for a raise, Tower.
The Tower hearings will continue tomorrow and next week, too, much longer than any other Bush nominations. Tonight, for example, the Senate was already happily confirming Secretary of State Baker, Secretary of Labor Dole, and the Budget Director, Richard Darman. Although the committee went out of its way to warn Tower that he shouldn't expect any special treatment just because he used to be its chairman, his confirmation really isn't any trouble. That's all just a part of the dance. In fact, many of the senators were already referring to him today as Mr. Secretary. That should become official sometime late next week. Jim Wooten, ABC News, Capitol Hill.
One other note from Washington for now. The Washington lawyer Ronald Brown has taken a giant step towards becoming the next national chairman of the Democratic Party. Brown's principal rival, Rick Weiner of Michigan, pulled out of the race today. Mr. Brown was Jesse Jackson's convention manager in Atlanta. He's been running for the national job as his own man, not as Mr. Jackson's representative. Well, now it is Mr. Reagan's turn to tell all. The publisher, Simon & Schuster, has won the right to print Mr. Reagan's memoirs. We're told he'll write himself, no co-author, no ghostwriters, and no word on the publication date or what the publisher is going to pay him. In a moment, more trouble at the Savannah River nuclear weapons plant. And later in the broadcast, trying to put a lid on hate television and the violent nightmare amid the immigrants' dream. of life in America.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by AT&T.
There has been another accident at the Savannah River nuclear plant in South Carolina, the only place in the country which manufactures a particular fuel needed for nuclear weapons. And once again, there are questions about plans to reopen the plant. Here's ABC's Bill Greenwood.
This reactor at Savannah River has been shut down since April because of safety problems. And during a routine test of its cooling system last Sunday, workers left a valve open that damaged the mechanism. But company technicians waited 2 days before reporting the incident to the federal government. Embarrassed Energy Department officials today told Senate investigators it was a serious violation of new procedures.
The extent of the damage, quote unquote, was unknown. That is what they tell us contributed to the delay in reporting it. That is an unacceptable answer.
The accident was similar to one last August at Savannah River that prompted officials to institute a new training program.
I got a great sense of deja vu here. We just have a different incident with the same kind of approach being taken to it by the people down there doing the operating.
Senators were assured the reactors at Savannah River will not be restarted until such problems are corrected. But they've had such assurances before. Bill Greenwood, ABC News, Washington.
On the subject of safety, the Boeing company says its 737 jetliners have passed a crucial safety check. After the crash of the British Midland 737 in England last month, there was concern that a fire alarm system on board might have told the pilot to shut down the wrong engine. Boeing today says a check of all but 9 of the 737s still being flown throughout the world shows no evidence of signal problems. American officials say that a former Cuban diplomat has defected to the United States and has been telling authorities all about alleged Cuban links to Middle East terrorist organizations. He's said to have acted as a go-between for Cuba and various terrorist groups in Iran, Syria, and in Lebanon. In Israel today, a small sign of the times. A reserve soldier was sentenced to 18 days in jail for refusing to serve in the occupied territories. He is the 54th soldier to do so since the Palestinian uprising began. In the occupied territories themselves today, another sign of the times. Israeli settlers ignoring the army and taking the law into their own hands. Here's ABC's Dean Reynolds.
Shattered windows this morning in the West Bank village of Bidia, the aftermath of an overnight raid by nearby Jewish settlers administering collective punishment for a stone-throwing incident that injured a Jewish bus passenger. Critics say such vandalism by settlers is part of a double standard of justice in the territories. There are a number of examples. While few settlers are even questioned after behaving as vigilantes, the army regularly demolishes homes of Palestinians simply suspected of throwing stones. This week, a 16-year-old Palestinian from Gaza was convicted of throwing a stone. The army said it didn't hit anybody, but the judge said the intent was murderous, and the boy was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Last year, a settler was convicted of killing a Palestinian shepherd. His sentence, 3 years with half suspended. In November, a car driven by this man, Rabbi Moshe Levinger, a settler leader, was hit with a stone. According to witnesses, Levinger opened fire into a crowd. One Palestinian bystander was killed and a second wounded. Levinger has not been arrested. Last year, when a Jewish girl was killed in the West Bank village of Beta, homes were demolished and Palestinians deported, even though the girl was shot accidentally by another settler. And while Palestinian protesters can be shot for blocking roads, settlers are seldom even detained for doing the same. Settlers have rights guaranteed under Israeli law. Palestinians live under much stricter rules of military occupation. And settlers are now warning that the longer the uprising goes on, the more they will take matters into their own hands. And that means Israel is sure to face even more questions about the brand of justice it employs. Dean Reynolds, ABC News in the Israeli-occupied West Bank.
Still overseas, Soviet officials now say the death toll from that earthquake in Soviet Central Asia is much smaller, as they put it, than first believed. About 300 people, not 1,000, died. Here's one of the more interesting suggestions we've heard today. The man who first climbed Mount Everest thinks it is time to give the mountain a rest. Sir Edmund Hillary says so many expeditions have climbed the world's tallest peak in recent years that parts of it are covered in the rubbish they leave behind. Sir Edmund recommends that no one be allowed to climb Everest for the next 5 years. We'll be back in just a moment. The king of junk bonds may be about to be fired. Michael Milken, the man who gave junk bonds their power in the marketplace, would be fired by Drexel Burnham Lambert as part of the company's $650 million plea bargain with federal prosecutors. More from ABC's Stephen Ogg.
Here's the deal which would lead to Michael Milken's departure from the firm he turned into a giant. In addition to being fired, Milken would be denied his pay for last year, estimated to be about $200 million. His dismissal is part of an agreement with U.S. Attorney Rudolph Giuliani in New York, under which Drexel agreed to plead guilty to violating federal securities laws to avoid being prosecuted on racketeering charges. In addition, Drexel has agreed to pay Milken's brother Lowell just half pay for last year and put him on unpaid leave. Michael Milken's lawyer said his client was being punished without trial and sentenced before a verdict. Among other parts of the agreement, any employee who's convicted will be fired. Drexel has agreed to pay $650 million to the government.
The agreement must still be accepted by the Securities and Exchange Commission, which filed its own lawsuit against Drexel and the Milkens last September. And what's next? The criminal indictment of Michael Milken. Everybody expects that, including Milken. Stephen Ogg, ABC News, Washington.
On Wall Street today, the Dow Jones Industrials gained another 9.5 points, and the trading was fairly active. The question in a Midwest courtroom today: how far can one community go to silence an organization it regards as a hated and dangerous advocate of racism? In Kansas City, the American Civil Liberties Union has filed a lawsuit claiming that the Ku Klux Klan is being unfairly kept off cable television. ABC's Charles Thomas is there.
The Ku Klux Klan does more than burn crosses to draw attention to itself. In at least 50 cities, the Klan also uses cable television public access channels to spread its fiery brand of racism.
Well, God wanted Hitler to kill 6 million Jews.
Normally, access channels can be used free of charge by any person or group, ranging from home movie makers to ministers. But when the Klan tried to put a show on in Kansas City, the city council, which controls the cable franchise, voted to eliminate the public access channel here rather than allow the Klan the right to use it.
We have something going on right now that I think transcends the right to speak.
City officials fear the show, to be called Kansas City, would incite violence, but Klan members disagreed.
We're not going to be preaching, go out and kill niggers, gooks, spicks, kikes. We're not going to be saying that. We're going to be using the proper word, Negroes, Orientals, Jews.
However, Klan members say it, the ACLU contends the city cannot drop its access channel just to keep unpopular views off the air. The lawsuit, on behalf of the Klan and others who use the channel, calls public access the electronic equivalent of a speaker's soapbox, a public forum protected by the First Amendment.
We simply feel that free speech means free speech, and it means free speech for unpopular beliefs as well as popular ones.
The lawsuit could affect the future of public access channels around the country. Can a city government unplug its cable soapbox because it doesn't like what it might hear? Charles Thomas, ABC News, Kansas City.
Overseas today, there was a tense moment in the Vatican this morning at the Pope's general audience. There was suddenly a commotion in the back of the room. He's a British tourist. He jumped up and shouted, "I am the Son of God, and I'll take your place." After he jumped over the rail, that man, the Swiss guard, grabbed him. They protect the Pope, and ultimately no one suffered any further harm. When we come back, national service.